Hello world. I feel like it's common knowledge that Japan has some strict sorting rules around waste collection. Cities will give out multi-page booklets with all the rules. It also seems like it's one of those things that foreigners always have trouble with when starting to live in Japan. Bottles need to be washed out, caps taken off, labels separated. Newspapers, magazines, tied up into nice bundles. Cans and glass bottles each go into their own collection bin. But after all is said and done, what happens to it all? Well, the first thing to know is that waste collection is managed by municipalities, not the central government, so what happens in one city can be very different from what happens in another. You might have heard the example where this one town in Japan recycles 81% of its waste. It's true, but that's a very special exception, not the rule. I went to the city of Saga in the southern part of Japan to see how they manage their waste. A lot of it is quite similar to what other cities do across the country. However, do keep in mind that this is not what every Japanese city does. I'll try to point out the things that may not be done everywhere else. One of those things is the separation of plastic. I made a whole video about plastic, so if you want to deep dive into that, check that out. But to summarize, in Japan, there's only two real plastic categories used for households: PET and PURA. PET as in PET bottles, like those found in drink vending machines, and PURA as in purashiku, as in plastic. PURA is a catch-all category for all plastics that are not PET. In Saga, all PURA is put in the burnable garbage category. It's not separated out for mechanical or chemical recycling. Instead, it's put into the regular garbage stream and is thermally recycled. What in the world is thermally recycled? It means burning waste to create energy. I'll be straight up. It seems like people really love this technology, or they hate it. But before I get into that, let's explain what actually happens. Waste is separated into different categories, with some items going into a recycling stream and others going into the burning stream, which, like I said, is called thermally recycling. In order to separate out the various items, Saga has their own plastic bags that residents have to purchase. They can be quite helpful as they have lists of what's accepted on the bags themselves. While editing, I noticed that they had a spot for the name of the collection area, as well as a name for the individual on each bag. I wondered why this was. This started from a resident's request who had neighbors who weren't separating waste correctly. A lot of areas in Japan have waste collection groups that comprise of 5, 10, or 20 households, so this could help a group like that figure out who was having trouble sorting their waste. Residents aren't required to put their names on the bags, but it is something that a waste collection group could ask their members to do. These items that are part of the non-burnable stream need to be hand-sorted by workers. These may be dangerous because they're sharp, like knives, scissors, and razor blades, or dangerous because they may explode, like aerosol cans, or dangerous because they would release toxic chemicals, like batteries. The workers will separate out items that can be recycled and those that can be burned in the incinerator. Oversized items, like furniture, can be brought to this special machine that'll crush it and then throw it into the big waste pit. The regular garbage trucks will pull in throughout the day and dump their waste into the pit as well. So at this waste facility, they don't know what kind of waste will be brought in and in what volumes. They have some ideas based on the season, like around New Year's there will be a lot of cleaning, so volumes will be higher, but in general, the mix of what's in the pit at any given moment is uncertain. To achieve optimal efficiency, you need a steady stream of stuff to burn, and you need to make sure that it all burns at an ideal temperature. To get that burning temperature correct, incineration facilities can use oil. Since plastic is made from oil, Saga didn't separate its PURA plastic from its waste since it could use that instead of virgin oil. But there's a new law called the Act of Promotion of Resource Circulation for Plastics, so Saga is preparing to separate its plastics from the burnable garbage category. It doesn't mean that they won't continue to burn plastic in their waste incineration facility, but rather they have more control over what gets burned and what doesn't. Right now, they separate out PET bottles to be recycled in a different way. In order to ensure even burning, there's an operator for the giant crane that mixes up all the incoming waste. It's basically a large-scale UFO catcher game. Waste is then moved into the furnace and burned. The heat generated boils water, that is then turned into steam, which turns a turbine, which generates electricity. After the burn, the volume of the waste is significantly reduced, but there still is ash that is left. There are air pollution control filters to make sure that the air being released is below environmental emission limits. So what you see coming out of the stack is mostly water steam. Something that normally isn't captured is CO2. However, this facility in Saga is the first attempt in the world to capture CO2 from an incineration facility.
佐賀市では清掃工場、ですね、焼却施設から出るですね、焼却した時に出る排ガスの一部をですね、回収して二酸化炭素のみを分離回収しております。回収した二酸化炭素についてはですね、近くに進出していただいている企業さんたちにですね、直接パイプラインを通してですね、供給販売させていただいております。その二酸化炭素については、それぞれ進出していただいている企業さんの使い方によるんですけど、農業利用だったり藻類に活用していただいて、主に光合成に活用いただいております。今の現状ですと、回収した二酸化炭素については全量ですね、完売とまでは言っていないので、
単純なその収入と経費の比較だけで見ると十分な収支が取れているとは言えなくてですね。
So what's going on is that they are capturing the CO2 not for environmental purposes, but rather to use it to build the local economy around the plant. It's only sold to nearby businesses by direct pipeline as it is cost efficient to do so. Even then, the current setup is not profitable. Although the system only allows them to collect 5% of CO2 emitted, they haven't been able to sell all their capacity yet. I asked why they don't do carbon storage, but there is no infrastructure in place to do so, especially not profitably. A country that is going to do large-scale carbon capture and storage is Norway, where its largest waste-to-energy plant plans to store 90% of its CO2 emissions into a rock formation 3 kilometers beneath the seabed of the North Sea. Besides CO2, there are other byproducts from the waste-to-energy plant that come in handy, like the heated steam left over after the burn. This is piped into the pool and sports complex that is conveniently located right next door. And the electricity also comes from the waste facility as well, so depending on your definition of renewable energy, this whole complex is mainly powered, heated, and cooled by renewable energy.
これとこれが工場から来ている高温水ですね。120度になります。この熱交換プレートって言うんですけども。
So the hot water from the plant goes into the heat exchanger. There, it transfers its heat to a separate set of pipes that will then supply the sports complex with water that's 50 to 60 degrees Celsius. The water that came from the plant is in a closed-loop system, so after being cooled down in the heat exchanger, it returns to the plant to be heated up again, repeating the cycle. What really impressed me about this waste facility is that it's not in some super industrial area, but rather it's built a community around it. There are no funny smells outside, and I don't think it'd be a bad place to live. It's not smack dab in the middle of a residential area, but it's also not far away either. With the sports areas, it's meant to be a place that people go to as part of a healthy life. As a matter of fact, this is something I noticed about other similar facilities around Japan. In my Tokyo by Bike video, I rode by this incineration plant in Edogawa. There's a park next to it, and they even have a free footbath. You'll also find care homes, schools, a nice traffic park, and new public housing. Everything sounds ideal. So what's the catch? Is there a catch? This, I don't know. I want to state this outright, that depending on what you read or who you listen to, this whole thermal recycling business, this whole waste-to-energy business, is either a huge greenwashing scam or a fantastic solution for dealing with waste. Here's some of the arguments for and against. Waste is diverted from other efforts like composting and recycling. In order for waste-to-energy plants to retain optimal efficiency, you want to continuously run them with no stoppages. This means you need enough stuff to burn. So you're creating a demand for waste and won't be naturally incentivized to reduce the amount of waste generated by residents or to use that waste in other processes, such as for composting or recycling. In Saga's case, they do have recycling programs in place, which is what the separation of waste into separate bags is about, as well as the sorting center at the facility. But would they be more aggressive in their plastic recycling efforts if the waste-to-incineration plant didn't exist? I think that's a fair assumption. However, a lot of the plastic thermally recycled in Saga either can't be recycled in a different way that doesn't create more CO2 or can't be alternatively recycled because the technology or facilities don't exist. Toxic chemicals are generated. From the burn, there's both ash and steam that's created. For the ash, there are 2 types, bottom ash and fly ash. Bottom ash is what falls down after the burn and is considered safe enough to go into a regular landfill. You can use the bottom ash as an ingredient in cement or even to create new land, such as Odaiba, an artificial island in Tokyo. Fly ash is collected as air pollutants are separated from the steam using the air pollution control system. It removes the majority of pollutants so that what's released meets strict environmental standards. The fly ash is considered toxic and if not properly handled is harmful to the environment. In Japan, it's chemically treated and then sent to a landfill. CO2 is released. Versus landfilling, incineration reduces greenhouse gases by eliminating methane gas emissions that would be generated in a standard landfill. However, in comparison to burning oil, natural gas, or coal, more CO2 is generated by incinerating waste than by burning those fossil fuels. If the choice is between landfilling and incineration, incineration releases less greenhouse gases. But if you could compost or recycle the waste, those methods would probably lead to less greenhouse gases. However, it would depend on the materials. Landfilling is reduced. The amount of ash generated ranges from 15 to 25% if going by weight, and from 5 to 15% if going by volume. So there's less going to the landfill, which is a reason why Japan likes this technology, as they have little space available for landfilling. As mentioned previously, Japan uses some ash to create artificial islands, thus creating new land. Electricity and heat is generated. Electricity is generated, as well as steam that can be used for heating purposes. However, if you're burning only to generate electricity or steam, there are other methods that release less CO2. They are placed in poor communities, polluting them. In Japan's case, I don't really see this. For example, in Tokyo, this is the map of where all the incineration facilities are located. They are essentially everywhere. Okay, so that's not an exhaustive list, but I believe that covers the main arguments for and against. I get the sense that there's a lot of cherry-picked data on both sides. I tried to present it as accurately as I could, but please keep in mind that I'm no expert. One thing I'd like to point out is that not all plants operate the same in a country, nor around the world. As far as I can tell, the plants operating in Japan are up to Japanese environmental standards. In any case, I left all my sources in the description, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are, so please drop a line in the comment section. Special thanks to everyone at Saga City, as well as the Saga City Waste Disposal Center, for giving us access to film and answering all our questions. I wasn't allowed to film in certain areas, like where the garbage trucks pull into, or where the sorting happens, but staff took my camera and filmed for me, so if you look really closely, you can spot me in the background in a few shots. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Peace.